You know, I'm starting to think there is no real rhyme or reason to what defines an era. Maybe it's possible to attribute the success of a musician to any number of outside factors, be they economic, cultural, or socio-political. But whether or not they endure in the public consciousness seems almost completely arbitrary. We talk about music from the past in terms of whether or not it holds up, but what exactly does that mean? Well, as far as I can tell, it means, does this still speak to a relevant concern on the part of the listener? It's sort of a common theory of the free market that if something succeeds, it means it's responding to a need or demand of some kind. Once the demand for it is gone, it no longer resonates. So if commercial success is largely a matter of being in the right place at the right time, artistic success should transcend the barriers of time and place. But I don't think that's the way it always works. Anyone who's been around long enough knows as well as I do that a lot of the time, music that survives its era absolutely does not deserve to. In the meantime, there's so much better stuff that gets completely forgotten, or falls by the wayside. This strikes me as being almost monstrously unfair. Wasn't the internet supposed to eliminate this kind of cultural gatekeeping by democratizing access to content? Who decides what gets remembered, and how do they decide this? And why should we even listen to them? These questions are too big and too boring for me to thoroughly cover in a video like this, but it does come up whenever I hear something that strongly, almost magically evokes the feeling of a certain period of time. And I get that iconic association that transports me directly to a specific moment in my life. And I just know that I'm having this experience alone. This shouldn't be that big of a deal, except that culture by definition is supposed to be shared experience. So when something that seems like it should be remembered by all indications isn't, at least not in comparison to far lesser contemporaneous works, it almost feels like there was some vast cover-up effort. Like what, were they blacklisted or something? And one of the most prominent examples that causes this effect for me is Des'ree. Does that name even ring a bell for you? Because the way I remember it, this song was everywhere.
You gotta be bad, you gotta be bold, you gotta be wiser.
I don't know if it's just me or if culture really has become more fragmented and specialized over time. But what this brings me back to is a time when music was still trying to be for everybody. Now, to be fair, I have kind of a personal connection to this song that made its appeal seem probably more widespread and universal than it actually was. And by that I mean my dad really liked this song.
Heard what your mother said, read the books your father read.
As it turns out, my dad has pretty good taste, but I didn't know this at the time. I don't know what all your parents were like, but mine were not exactly keen on listening to anything current. So this was a bigger deal to me than it probably sounds. Whenever it came on the radio when we were in the car, my dad would turn it up and we'd jam out together. And that's my personal connection to this song. The first music that my dad and I ever bonded over.
All I know, love is every day.
And doesn't it just seem like a song that a dad in the 90s would be into? Just a nice little melody, a beautiful set of piano chords, a calm, soothing vocal performance, and that silky smooth production. Yet the beat is just infectious and uptempo enough to keep it from turning into adult contemporary mush. I like to think it made my dad feel hip without making him feel like a poser. And in general, I don't think anyone even tries to create that kind of appeal anymore. Des'ree was born Desiree Annette Weeks in London, England, to a Guyanese mother and a Barbadian father. Her musical background incorporates some of the Caribbean and Calypso-style music she heard from the part of her childhood where her family lived in Barbados. But as she tells it, some of the most significant musical influences of her early life were classic pop stars more familiar to American audiences, such as Stevie Wonder, Bob Marley, and Billie Holiday. As a result, when she started making her own music, she tried to sort of pull all these influences together into a singular cohesive sound that combines elements of jazz, calypso, reggae, soul, and pop without being easily categorized. It's a style that she refers to as acoustic soul. Acoustic in the sense that it aims to be a direct, impassioned, and honest mode of communication. What's impressive about her career's beginnings is that she was a psychology student with zero music industry connections when she got her big break. Through some combination of raw, preternatural talent and incredible luck, she got a record deal with Sony 550 basically by just blind submitting them her demo, which they liked so much they signed her over that weekend. You also have to credit her for having keen targeting instincts. The reason she specifically sent her demo to Sony was because they were the ones who had signed Terrence Trent D'Arby, and just based on that, she was able to correctly predict that they'd be interested in her music as well. Her debut album, Mind Adventures, was released in 1992 and had some success in the UK, even though the United States slept on it completely. Her vocals were compared to Anita Baker, since she has that sort of lower, smokier, more alto range. The music is a surprisingly diverse blend of earthy soul pop and jazzy funk, or funky jazz maybe.
Mind adventures, you may have eyes you may not see.
Des'ree herself doesn't speak so highly of this album, basically dismissing it as a work of a teenager. But his first single, Feel So High, co-written with Michael Graves, eventually got as high as number 13 on the British charts after being re-released with an alternate mix.
'Cause I feel so high, I'm reaching out.
Let me just tell you this right now, it pays to be familiar with Des'ree's work, because she does not take any infringement of her songs lightly. No less an icon than Miss Janet Jackson herself found out the hard way, when Des'ree sued her in 1997 for the similarities between the melody of Feel So High and Janet's song Got Till It's Gone.
Have a feeling, now believing that you
Show me your company. Come and tell me who you be.
Now, to me, it's not that distinctive of a melody, and I personally don't think it's an intentional lift. But the similarity is pretty undeniable, and Janet's people ended up settling out of court by paying around $2 million in royalties. That didn't happen until Got Till It's Gone was released in 1997, though. In between, Des'ree finally broke through to American audiences in 1994, on her second album, I Ain't Moving, with the hit single, You Gotta Be.
Listen as your day unfolds. Challenge what the future holds.
Peaking at number 5 in the Billboard Hot 100 in March of 1995, You Gotta Be was one of the defining songs of that period. To give you some idea of its competition, the 4 songs that ranked above it that week were Take a Bow by Madonna, Creep by TLC, Candy Rain by Soul For Real, and Baby by Brandy.
You gotta be hard, you gotta be tough, you gotta be stronger.
It was also nominated for Best Female Video at the 95 MTV Video Music Awards, but lost to that same Madonna song. 1995, as I recall, was an extremely good year for R&B. The stuff that was most popular tended to be a more urban-sounding hip-hop hybrid, less indebted to classic soul. This stuff was more sample-heavy, with the rhythm and the bass groove placed more front and center, and not as much emphasis on melodic singing. Think post-New Jack Swing era R&B. I don't really hear any of that in Des'ree. She comes off almost as something of a throwback in this environment. Apparently, this is why she was so hard to market to American audiences at first. But around this time, mainstream R&B was also incorporating more diverse influences, which came through with successful artists such as Dion Ferris and Michelle DeJolisso. So the time was just about right for a song like You Gotta Be, which made Des'ree into an international star and charted in at least 10 different countries. Its broad crossover appeal is imparted through a series of catchy melodic and rhythmic hooks, as well as an inspirational, uplifting set of lyrics. The sentiment risks being rather too general, but it has enough flexibility that it can equally apply to trying to move on from a breakup as well as working hard towards a long-term goal on the daily. Co-written with producer Ashley Ingram, the song basically amounts to a set of positive affirmations set to music. Here's a complete list of things you gotta be.
Bad, bold, wiser, hard, tough, stronger, cool, calm, stay together.
This is a good example of one of those songs that sounds like exactly what it's about. The music works in perfect tandem with the lyrics to doubly reinforce this spirit of positive self-help energy. When I listen to this, I feel like I can take on the world. I have a lot of memories from around this time of being in scouts and going on a lot of hikes and camping trips, and it kind of feels like I heard the song playing in my head every time I was standing on some high mountain peak or watching the sun come up on the horizon of some remote campsite. That's what listening to the song has always felt like for me. I mean, I imagine it's no coincidence that the album cover shows Des'ree sitting on this big rock surrounded by what appears to be a natural body of water. Sometimes it's nice to have a song to accompany those kinds of moments. It strikes the perfect balance between quiet contemplation and seize-the-day motivational power, which again is a vibe I'm not sure I've heard from any popular music since. Even Des'ree's other material mostly doesn't attempt to capture the same spirit.
'Cause I ain't moving from my face, from my race, from my history. Yes, we'll cry, yes, we'll cry. Our hearts, they feel no hate.
I don't know if it's because these songs were so different from her hit single that they didn't catch on quite so momentously, or if they just lack a certain uniqueness compared to it. On the other hand, the song that sounds the most like You Gotta Be to me is In My Dreams, and although I think it would have made the best choice for a follow-up single, I can sort of see how it might have sounded a little redundant coming on the heels of it.
In my dreams, we had space and time. In my dreams, baby, we could fly.
I think Des'ree's just one of those artists who's maybe a bit too multifaceted to be content to 1 or 2 songs. It's music that you kind of have to sit with and engage with on its own terms, but if you got the patience, you'll find some gems in there. Some of it reminds me a little of Seal, who she toured with around this time, with these busy, soulful arrangements combined with a mellow sort of atmosphere. Other tracks are more reminiscent of some of Whitney Houston's stripped-down love ballads, almost verging on torch song territory at times.
'Cause
Now, this song was used as a love theme from Baz Luhrmann's Romeo plus Juliet, which I guess is why it sounds like the saddest song ever made. And it functioned as essentially the first single for her 1998 album, Supernatural.
I don't wanna see a ghost. It's a sight that I fear most. I'd rather have a piece of toast. Watch the evening news.
Amusingly, this lyric was voted the worst one ever written by a 2007 BBC poll, which I think is a little unfair. It's clearly not a good line, but when I think of worst ever, my mind goes to something like actively harmful. Runner-ups of this poll include Elevation by U2, Africa by Toto, and Champagne Supernova by Oasis. So this is probably just one of those times when it's the children who are wrong. After working mainly with Ashley Ingram and Michael Graves as primary collaborators on her first two albums, Des'ree expanded the songwriting and production credits on Supernatural to include more established hitmakers like Babyface, Rick Nowels, Timothy Attack, and Prince Samson. The overall mood of the album feels a bit more playful and whimsical than what she had done before, while updating her palette to include songs that showcase her reggae and tango-ish sensibilities.
Some say he should shave his head, but he's proud to be a dread.
In 1999, You Gotta Be was re-released as a single with a new mix, following its use in an advertising campaign for the Ford Focus. Apparently it was also used in films like The Next Karate Kid and The Object of My Affection. I can't claim with any certainty that they used it for training montages during the 1996 Summer Olympics in Atlanta, Georgia, or if that's just a quirk of my memory malfunctioning, but if they didn't, they should have. Otherwise, that's a huge missed opportunity.
Remember.
She had always been more successful in the UK than in America, and that continued as the re-release of the song charted even higher in that country than the original release, hitting the top 10 in the week of March 4th, 1999. That same year, she also won the Brit Award for Best Female Artist. In 2000, she released a collection of B-sides and rarities called Endangered Species, followed by a new studio album, Dream Soldier, in 2003. Sony dropped her following the complete commercial failure of that album, and her career cuts off abruptly at that point. As far as anyone can tell, there has been essentially no new music and very little press from her in the last 15 years. In 2007, she sued Beyoncé for doing a copyright-violating rendition of Kissing You, because apparently she wasn't supposed to alter the title or shoot a video for it, which, like her lawsuit against Janet Jackson, was settled out of court. Once again, I must urge you to please not mess around with Des'ree on the copyright front. I'm even a little scared to release this video. If Janet Jackson and Beyoncé both got taxed, I can only imagine my chances would be about zero. But I'm taking the risk anyway. Because for the purposes of my show, Des'ree is an artist who typifies the 90s as well as anyone more famous you could name. Her versatility and ability to fit into multiple formats at once is a defining characteristic of this era, and I think it helps her songs to still feel fresh and semi-modern since they were never tethered to the current trends. In 2011, she contributed vocals to a sleep therapy CD by Julie Langton Smith, but her recording career has been otherwise quiet. I imagine if she ever did come back, she'd still sound just as heartfelt and hopeful as ever, still looking to the horizon after all this time. There weren't too many artists who managed to be of their time, forward-thinking, and reverential of the past all at once. And if there are any others, they are probably also from the 90s. I am Jacob, and this was Rad 90s Music. I'll see you sometime in the future.